And we are live once again. And here in the Midwest, we are anticipating a snowstorm weekend. So I think a lot of us are going to dash out and make sure we've got our shelves filled and our larder ready for what could be an extended in-home weekend.
So, yeah, with extra lard.
I have plenty of extra lard. And
in your larder.
I'll use butter.
Person. I can make it through the weekend with the lard I have. Thank you.
Well,
he keeps it very close to him.
I keep it ready. I keep it.
The thermostat, you can probably burn off some of the lard. But yes, we are preparing for an onslaught of snow and all sorts of wintry phenomena. And I have Barrett and Charlie as dialogue companions this morning. How are you guys doing?
That's great. Really well. Thank you.
Yeah, I never know. You know, when they talk about a snowstorm, it's the ones where they say it's going to be 13 inches of snow that end up being 3. And the ones that, this last one we had, they said it was maybe going to be 1 inch. And then we got like 6 inches. So I just never know. It's like, okay.
Well, that's pretty much the way weather forecasting works is, you know, it just makes you aware that something's going to happen, which you probably could figure out on your own anyway. Nonetheless, that's the way it works here because they can sell advertising. And,
yeah, the bigger the numbers, the better, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And as we're moving, you know, away from New Year's Day and that period of people making New Year's resolutions, we're now mid-month. I wonder how many people have stuck to their guns and have continued to sacrifice in order to make their lives better, because sacrifice, according to A Course in Miracles, is almost an anathema, and that's really kind of the core of being able to live with yourself and being able to enjoy your life, is to not get into that mindset of sacrifice. And so are you guys doing good with your resolutions?
I have no resolutions.
Either do I.
There you go. Course in Miracles. Once again, it has effectively altered your attention and placed it back where it belongs.
Wiped my brain.
Excuse me, just a sec. I got to go close the door. It's a little loud over here.
Okay.
So, how about you? Have you had any resolutions? Any luck with them?
I have had no resolutions since about 1987. So I'm just, you know, enjoying the boat ride wherever the river takes me.
That's a good one. I like that. Row, row, row your boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whoever created that little children's ditty actually was probably fairly enlightened.
Yeah. I remember at one of our last gatherings, I said that, and I just said each line very slowly, and I ended with "Life is but a dream," and sort of like this, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Well, there's one of the Star Trek, I think it's Star Trek 4, where they're rescuing the whales, and they go back in time, but Bones and Kirk are singing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat." And of course, what's his name? Spock brings logic into the situation and says, "But life is not a dream."
Yeah, you might be wrong about that, Spock. He seems to be right about a lot of things, but I think he made a mistake there.
Yeah, I think his inclination to analyze and categorize and, you know, all of those attributes of the mind kind of causes a stumbling block every once in a while.
Yeah.
I definitely have my own inner Spock, the computer programmer, the guy on the math team, all that stuff. So I definitely have that part within me, but I just keep it locked in a little cage so I don't, don't get out. No.
Don't go anywhere.
Every now and then he picks the lock, though, right?
That's right. And all of a sudden, algorithms start running around in my mind.
Well, in line with what we were chatting about before we went live, we are looking at chapter 3, the innocent perception. This first section, the atonement without sacrifice, and down to the third paragraph. The statement, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, is a misperception by which one assigns his own evil past to God. The evil past has nothing to do with God. He did not create it, and he does not maintain it. God does not believe in retribution. His mind does not create that way. And isn't that interesting? Right now, in our current society, retribution is kind of the foundation of what we imagine to be part of our freedom.
It's true. It's true. We just need to turn on the news or even sometimes look out our front window to see some sort of attack happening. Definitely on the political scene and the international scene. There's all this conflict and there's all these players that are going against each other. And we see this sort of vengeance and retribution all over the place. And it sort of makes sense, right? Because a deep part within us believes in retribution. And so this world is going to be a place of retribution because the world can't help but show us what's inside of the mind. So as long as there's conflict and vengeance and retribution within the mind, it's going to be playing out here in the world. So the work, as we know with the Course, is never about changing what's happening out in the world, but always about changing what's within. Sometimes as we change what's within, we do also take action or do things out in the world, but that's never the purpose, right? That's sort of just an after effect, because when we come into a state of peace, when we let go of the fear and come back into love, then that's really what this is all about. It's about finding that place of peace and love within us, and then just making that choice over and over and over again.
Yeah, that you're right. That concept of retribution, is the offshoot of that belief in separation. So the belief in separation says somebody else must sin, somebody else is guilty, must be punished. Retribution comes strictly from that. There's none of that happening in oneness. There can't be any sin. There can't be any guilt. Sin, guilt, and fear, the tripod, the ego belief system is built on. That is what the Course is teaching us. It's showing us over and over and over again. Look at the way you think. Look at the way you see things. Look at the way you perceive things, and recognize that this is all being done in error. None of it's true. It's an entirely meaningless thought system that you guys work with, and there is another way to see this, and that's what the Course is showing us. It's another way to perceive, another way to have a different vision of what's happening. As you touched on, Barrett, it's a correction in the mind. It's the only place it's taking place, and the mind of God is what we're truly coming from, and who we truly are, and the only place we are.
That is so very true. Going a little bit further down in this paragraph, it says, the belief that God rejected Adam and forced him out of the Garden of Eden. That's an interesting idea that is, presents itself very early in the Bible. So if you're looking at the Old Testament, you're feeding that concept into your mind right from the initiation point that you have sinned because of the original sin, which was Adam's sin. And that you are in line for punishment. And that's what makes it so very, very difficult to get into that space of surrendering to God, because there's the apprehension of God turning out to be a psycho, vicious murderer, and is going to get you right off the bat. And it just gets uglier and uglier and uglier as it unfolds. It says, it is also why you may believe from time to time that I am misdirecting you. So the role of Jesus in this whole thing, it becomes very fuzzy and confused, again, if you are not looking at it through the lens of A Course in Miracles, because ambiguities and misinterpretations are rife in the Bible, and they kind of lead you off in that direction of a punitive God, and you're being, the most vile creature in all of creation, which of course is so incredibly whipped around by truth when God sees his creation as the crown of all creation and knows us only as the perfect beings that we have forgotten that we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are all very twisted ideas, right, within our mind. Anything that's really connected to this idea of separation is inevitably going to be false, right? I mean, just very logically, if you start with a false premise, then whatever you draw from that false premise is also going to be false, or it could be false. It's just, it's coming from a false source, so you can't know if it's true or not, right? And this idea then that the separation is false, and everything that springs forth from that, that's going to be of like, right? Like begets like. And the good news is that God is whole and complete. And so everything that comes from God, including the truth of what we are, is whole and complete as well. So again, there's a process of kind of sorting out that happens with the Course, where we sort what is true apart from what is false. And the Course section makes it very easy. It says that only what is eternal is true. Only what is unchanging is true. Well, when we look around the world, there's not much that fits the bill, right? I mean, basically, there's nothing that fits the bill. That the only things that are really true here in the world are things that are beyond the mind's, beyond the eye, right? Things like love, things like wholeness, things like peace. These things are true, but we can't see them. So anything that the senses show us is actually inherently untrue. And this process of starting to get what I want my identity to rest on is what is true instead of what is false. So what is false? Well, then the body is false, right? Because the body is not eternal. All of these bodies are eventually going to fall apart and end. But the good news is that they are not our truth. There's no line that is repeated more in the Course other than I am not a body, right? This line is repeated over 20 times. I'm not sure exactly how many, but he says it again and again and again for us to repeat to ourselves so we can know that the body is not what we are, because the body is a symbol of separation. But once we realize that it's not our truth, we can use the body for the means of communication. And what is communication? It's sharing love, it's sharing truth, it's sharing that oneness. It's helping to dispel all of the shadows and the illusions so that we can come back into our wholeness.
Yeah, I love the way you touched on the logical progression of this. I've always kind of seen the Course, and I might have even read this through Ken Wapnick or something, that, where the beginning of the Course is where Jesus is really pointing out, look, here's the way you think, here's the way you see things, and there's an alternative. But the presentation is, once you start to dig into it and really start to take it in, you really do see the nonsensical way we think. It really is crazy, and he keeps reminding us of that too throughout the Course. You guys are insane. You look at the way you think, and I love that about this, because it keeps, for me, it keeps the levity in it. It's like you don't have to take this so seriously. You guys think you're crazy, you think crazy, but there's another way to think, and think with me, think with the Father, think with the right mind. I love this distinction between the right-minded thinking and the wrong-minded thinking. You know, one based in this ego idea of separation, and the other based in this idea of oneness. You know, no separation, no division. And the two thought systems are, as he says, they're diametrically opposed to each other. You know, one continues down that vein that we started with, talking about this idea of vengeance is mine. Everything about this thought system is about vengeance, and the other is about love, and recognizing that. I was in a lesson this morning, one of the workbook lessons, early workbook lessons, where, I mean, that's really what we're just talking about, right? Is to recognize God is in everything, you know, absolutely everything, and there is no separation, God from anything. You know, I love that. You know, I was raised a Catholic, and an old Catholic. Early Catholic teaching in the Catechism. You know, God is omnipotent, omniscient. You know, He's all-knowing. He's everywhere. He's all-knowing, and that's all there is. There's just that knowing, that knowledge. You know, we are part of that. A beautiful thing.
That it is, and it takes the fear out of life. You know, life is constantly showing us images that we find terrifying. And the reality is that we are creating those images in order to terrify ourselves, because we have the one fundamental fear, and that is the fear of God, that creates all of the other apparent things to be terrified of, when really the truth is, if we are not bodies, then we're not vulnerable. We can't be hurt. And that's the simple lesson. That's the fundamental groundbreaking imagery that the Course offers us, is that as soon as we stop associating ourselves with physicality, all of a sudden we are liberated. We are restored to the truth of our being. You know, and getting back on track with the New Year's resolutions here, going down to this next section that says sacrifice is a notion totally unknown to God. It arises solely from fear, and frightened people can be vicious. Sacrificing in any way is a violation of my injunction that you should be merciful, even as your Father in heaven is merciful. It has been hard for many Christians to realize that this applies to themselves. Good teachers never terrorize their students. To terrorize is to attack, and this results in rejection of what the teacher offers. The result is learning failure, and that really is the last 2,000 years of human history. You know, and Jesus brought these ideas forth, and 99.9% of the population has failed to comprehend what was being communicated. So now, with the arrival of A Course in Miracles, we obviously have somehow shifted gears and arrived at a place in time where more people are willing to hear these ideas. More people are willing to awaken to the recognition that life is not what we have thought it was for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There is a dawning that's sort of happening, but it happens, even as it seems to happen collectively, it really happens within each of us, right? And that's where all of our work really is, that we need to just keep being aware, right? More and more aware of our own desire for anger, our own desire to judge, our own desire to attack. All of these things are really within ourselves, and as we bring them into the light, then we can start to heal them, right? Everything that we hide, we actually give power to. It's like if you're pushing down something, you actually have to push against it to hold it down, and then it pushes back even stronger. And that's what happens when we hide our inner feelings, our inner beliefs, our inner issues. There's this struggle and this strain. And so the work with forgiveness is really allowing these things to come up, not hiding from them, but looking at them with gentleness and kindness, I often think of holding Jesus's hand as I look upon whatever anger or fear is within me, and knowing that in that light, everything will start to melt away. Everything will start to fall away. Because, when you bring the shadow to the light, it ultimately is going to disappear, right? Why is that? Because there's nothing to a shadow. A shadow has no substance. It is simply a lack of light. And all of our issues are simply a lack of light, or you could even say a lack of love. And as we bring them into the love within, they all will inevitably melt away. There's nothing that we bring to that love that can overpower it, because there's nothing more powerful than love. There's nothing more than oneness, right? There's nothing more than completeness. There is nothing else. It is all that there is. And so as we bring these ideas to it, only what is true will remain, and everything else has to melt and fall away.
Yeah, this recognition too that Jesus points out early on. That voice of God, that Holy Spirit is inside all of us. And Barry, you were touching like it's our individual work to work on this, but to know that we have the answers inside of us already. We have that connection. We can never be separated from our Father. And we can never, as much as we think we are, as much as we think we are sinners and we should be punished, as much as fear as we can generate in our mind, the truth of it is we can never be separated from our Father. We do truly live in that light that you were just talking about. That's who we truly are. So the dawning for us is that, the awakening for us is to awaken and to recognize that, yes, I have this other voice inside of me. And I can, the Course tells us that that voice is always there, waiting to respond to us anytime we turn to Holy Spirit for help, or turn to Jesus for help. It's being drowned out, sitting there in silence, being drowned out by the cacophony that we believe is real, that the egos present. All we need really do, thank you. All we need really do is turn to that other voice, turn to that inside guidance that all of us have, and do it in the silence, do it in the quiet, and we will be guided. We will be seeing things clearly. We will be seeing things differently, and we will be experiencing this life differently when we do it.
Yeah, that is very true, Charlie. I think that, it's so hard to let go of that response to the ego's voice, because the ego is always in panic mode. It's always trying to get us lit up and stampede us away from our true nature, our true identity. Further on down in the next paragraph here, he picks up with one of my favorite images, because I spent so much of my life in the art field, and for 20 years I made my living in the arts. And one of my favorite images is the picture of the lion and the lamb laying down together. And here he says the lion and the lamb laying down together symbolize that strength and innocence are not in conflict, but naturally live in peace. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, is another way of saying the same thing. A pure mind knows the truth, and this is its strength. It does not confuse destruction with innocence, because it associates innocence with strength, not with weakness. And that really is, again, the constant litany of the world that we imagined here for ourselves to experience. And it's also about punishment. It's also about superior strength. It's also about, pushing back and pounding people into the ground and making everyone submissive. And when it takes on a large part of our political identity, then it really gets ugly and ruthless and bloody. And, we end up becoming involved in wars all around the planet with this rhetoric that we feed ourselves about it's a necessary thing in order for us to maintain a peaceful coexistence with the world. We have to make it surrender to our personal ego, our identity as a nation. And it just goes on and on and on. And yet the truth is, none of it is real. None of it has any validity in truth, because true strength is not wielded by the sword. It is a process of the gentle acceptance of the world that we have inhabited for, since the beginning of time, since the beginning of this madness.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking as you're speaking, Chris, of the this constant message we receive here that we're going to go kick the crap out of somebody else to keep ourselves free.
Yeah, and it's a very effective tool that is being wielded against our fellow citizens, and it's over and over again.
All the honor we pay to the warriors, right, for going and to keep us free, and yet all we are is imprisoned.
Yeah, I really like this idea of real strength not being physical power, not being strength over another, but really being psychological strength. And what that means is psychological invulnerability, right? This is what we're moving to as we practice these ideas, where we can be completely peaceful and completely loving, even in the face of perhaps physical attack. And this is what Jesus was demonstrating in the crucifixion. And he's not saying we need to be nailed to a cross to learn this or teach this, but we can practice this idea in probably much less extreme circumstances. But to really be able to be fully open-hearted, to be fully present, to be fully kind in the face of other people's anger or upset or violence, perhaps. And it doesn't mean, you should stand there, quote A Course in Miracles, if someone's coming at you with a gun. Probably the best thing to do is to run away. You can always do the forgiveness stuff later, but you can find yourself in a place of peace even as you're running away, or even as you're talking them down, or again, don't be a hero, right? We're not saying that you should try to fix the dream by changing the form, but what we're talking about is that there is a way to be in this world where all of our own fears have been healed. So then we simply do whatever is loving and kind. As you were saying, Charlie, right? This idea of exporting democracy at the end of a barrel of a gun. I mean, it's absurd, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? We're going to shoot you into enlightenment. What? But that's the absurd premise that this world is based on, right? It basically echoes this absurd premise that we cooked up as soon as we thought we were a separate thing. As soon as we thought we were a separate thing, all of a sudden there was this energy of opposition. There was the divine, and then there was us, who we thought we were apart from that. And all of a sudden, because of the pain of this, we had to try to supplant God. We had to try to take his throne, right? It's ridiculous, but you can see all the ways that we try to do this. And on a nation level, every nation is trying to be the best. America's #1, right? We got to be the top of the heap. Well, what if Montenegro is #1? I don't know. I mean, why can't we all be #1? It's this competitive energy that is really not helpful, and it's really not loving. And when we come to this deeper experience of this, all of a sudden we see we're all in this together. And then it doesn't matter what your nationality is, doesn't matter what your sexuality is, doesn't matter what your gender, your race, or any other distinguishing characteristic is, because we are all in this for our awakening to our truth. All of these physical differences melt away because they're really not significant. Sure, they're meaningful within the dream, but within the level of truth, they mean absolutely nothing. So what happens is we go through our life more and more seeing that there is no real value in these physical distinctions. Sure, we look both ways before we cross the street, right? We do whatever is normal within the physical world. But we realize that it's not the source of our happiness. It never has been, and it never could be. And in this realization, all of a sudden, we do find that freedom. And this is how we actually share freedom, is by living it and by expressing it in our relationships. That this is how the world is actually transformed. Not that that's the purpose of the Course. It's just a side effect. As these ideas deepen into us, of course the world is going to change, right? It has to, because as we have more peace within, we're going to see more peace without. But it's really just a side effect, and not the goal of working with the Course in Miracles.
Yeah, I like this down here, Chris, in this section. You know, they're right below where you were reading, it says, a pure mind knows the truth, and this is its strength. You know, there is no, so all the things we're talking about, the fear and the separation and the division and the war and the, you know, all these things that we bring into existence in the illusion to verify the fact that we are separate, to give it, you know, give it all its necessary strength. All those things, you know, disappear, like you're talking about there, when you have this different perception. When you're coming from the vision of the Holy Spirit and the clarity of the Holy Spirit and the clarity in the light, you know, the darkness disappears. And a pure mind knows this, you know, there's strength in that. You know, there's only weakness and fear. I mean, it's just a symbol of fear. That's all it really is. And so if there's no fear, there's nothing to be fearful of. You are nothing but strong. You know, it's again, it's this wonderful logic that Jesus presents to us in the Course. And just a little further down, in the next paragraph, he says, innocence is incapable of sacrificing anything, because the innocent mind has everything and strives only to protect its wholeness. It cannot project. So we no longer need to make somebody else guilty, because there is no somebody else. We don't need to reinforce separation with our stories, because separation doesn't exist. So, you know, this is the logical thought process that Jesus presents to us with the Course, and it's absolutely beautiful and stunning. And I remember Barrett's heard this story, maybe you too, Chris, but you know, the first time I picked this book up, and I was sitting in a hotel room in New York, and I would just crack it open, and you know, just pick out a paragraph and start reading, and I was dumbfounded. I hopped out of the chair and I'd walk around this hotel room going, my God, nobody here wrote this. This is unbelievable, you know? And I would pace back and forth kind of in this ecstatic joy, and sit back down and pop the book open again and read another paragraph going, my God, nobody wrote this. And I'd have to hop up and pace around the room again. You know, it was so exciting to see a thought process so alien to the one that I had all my life, you know, and yet knowing, you know, also all through my life that there was there had to be another way. There had to be another way to see things. I can remember experiencing that as a child, you know, that what was going on at that moment didn't make sense. There was no love in that particular incident, whatever it was. And so that silent voice, that knowing, that Holy Spirit inside of us is always there. It's always been there. We just need to stop listening to the one story. Again, you know, I keep harping on this, but just turn to that other teacher, you know. That innocence is there. That light is there. That love is there. Always been there, always will be there. And we simply need to, you know, as Jesus says early in the Course, be willing, just be willing to listen, be willing to see it, be willing to experience it differently.
Yeah, that is the way it works, without a doubt. And ultimately, taking on this very simple approach to living, which is to surrender all of your fears and concerns, is a source of confidence. And you will find, as you start to launch into A Course in Miracles, that the more you immerse yourself in these ideas, the more confident you become in life itself. And within that, you eliminate the need for being apprehensive or fearful about what might happen. You know, if somebody shows up with a gun, as you were saying, Barrett, well, incidents like that will start fading away. You will stop attracting those experiences because you're no longer identifying with an ego. that is always in a state of terror, and you're beginning to identify with Jesus, who is always in a state of serenity. And that really is what the Course offers us, is the opportunity to be confident that everything that's happening in our lives is something that God is in control of. So we can just enjoy the journey. We no longer have to be in a state of fight or flight. And that ultimately is, I think, the foundation of what all of us are looking for, is that lifelong experience of just being able to enjoy life.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, as the shadow fades, the light emerges, and as we do this work, the light can't help but show up more and more in our experience. It's just inevitable. You know, if you're cleaning a dirty mirror, the mirror is going to get cleaner, right? It's what you're doing. So that's what we're doing here. We're cleaning the mirror of the mind, and then God's light just shines and is reflected in that mirror more and more and more. So, yeah. Well, it's been really fun hanging with you guys this morning. As always, I love these I love these joinings. So,
Has been. Thank you.
It was a wonderful discussion, and again, an opportunity to affirm the truth, which makes us comfortable with life. You know, it causes us to relax and to be appreciative and to enjoy the journey rather than being a victim of the journey. So it was great connecting once again, and I'm looking forward to another dialogue next week.
Beautiful. Yeah. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Take care.
All right.